She grew up in a modest home with her widowed mother, Mama Nkechi, who worked tirelessly to provide for her. Mama Nkechi ran a small roadside stall selling produce and snacks to travelers. A humble venture, but enough to keep them going. She always believed in Adaora's potential and sacrificed much to give her the education and opportunities she herself never had. Adaora, her only child, was her pride and joy. As a young woman, Adaora dreamed of escaping the village life and finding prosperity. Her dreams eventually led her to the city, where she secured a job as a secretary in a prominent company. There, she caught the eye of Chukwudi, a wealthy businessman known for his charm and influence. Chukwudi was drawn to Adaora's beauty and ambition, and after a whirlwind romance, he proposed. Adaora accepted, seeing in him the means to a life of comfort and status, far from the struggles of her childhood. When Adaora brought Chukwudi to meet Mama Nkechi, she was elated at her daughter's newfound happiness and success. Mama Nkechi saw Chukwudi as the answer to her prayers and felt a sense of pride, knowing that her sacrifices had helped Adaora achieve this new life. The wedding was grand, with Chukwudi sparing no expense to make the event memorable. Adaora basked in the joy of her new status, enchanted by the glamour surrounding her. However, after the wedding, Adaora's attitude toward her mother began to shift. While she was initially happy to have her mother visit their luxurious home, Adaora gradually grew embarrassed by Mama Nkechi's simplicity and her unpolished village manners. Chukwudi, too, seemed uncomfortable around his new mother-in-law, though he never expressed it directly. Feeling pressure to fit into her new social circle, Adaora started distancing herself emotionally from her mother. Mama Nkechi was heartbroken by Adaora's sudden coldness. She had expected her daughter to embrace her as part of her new life, but it seemed Adaora wanted to leave the past behind completely, including her mother. When Mama Nkechi voiced her concerns, Adaora dismissed them, brushing her off with vague reassurances. Mama Nkechi, unfamiliar with the city and intimidated by her new surroundings, felt isolated. In a desperate attempt to feel useful, Mama Nkechi offered to help with the house chores. Adaora was initially against the idea, fearing it would look bad to her wealthy friends if they found out her mother was doing menial tasks. But, seeing no other option to keep her mother occupied and out of sight when guests arrived, she reluctantly agreed. Over time, Mama Nkechi's help became less of a favor and more of an expectation, and she found herself fulfilling the role of an unpaid maid in her own daughter's home. Adaora's transformation into a socialite intensified. She attended extravagant parties, dressed in the latest fashion, and mingled with the elite. Her life revolved around social gatherings and maintaining her new image. Mama Nkechi, on the other hand, was relegated to the kitchen and cleaning chores. She wasn't allowed to join in any of Adaora's events, as Adaora feared her mother's presence would ruin her sophisticated image. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, Mama Nkechi collapsed. Adaora found her lying on the floor and called for help, but she was more concerned about what Chukwudi and her friends would think than about her mother's health. A doctor was summoned, who informed them that Mama Nkechi needed proper rest and medical attention. Despite the doctor's advice, Adaora insisted that her mother continue working once she recovered, as she didn't want to pay for additional household help. Mama Nkechi tried to plead with Adaora, explaining that her health was failing and that she could no longer handle the heavy workload. But Adaora coldly dismissed her mother's words, telling her that if she didn't want to help, she could return to the village. Devastated, Mama Nkechi remained silent, fearing she would lose her only connection to her daughter if she left. As the weeks passed, Mama Nkechi's condition worsened. She struggled to complete her tasks but pressed on, hoping to appease Adaora. The household staff and Chukwudi's relatives who visited noticed her deteriorating health and whispered about her situation. Some felt sympathy, while others were appalled by Adaora's treatment of her mother. But Adaora remained indifferent, consumed by her own lifestyle and the need to maintain appearances. One day, Mama Nkechi's frail body gave way, and she fainted while preparing dinner. This time, she was rushed to the hospital, where she was admitted for severe exhaustion and malnutrition. Adaora, concerned only with the inconvenience, begrudgingly paid for her mother's medical bills. But the incident had sparked rumors about her treatment of Mama Nkechi. Adaora's reputation among her friends and neighbors began to tarnish. News of Adaora's behavior reached the village. Relatives and former neighbors were shocked, unable to believe that the once loving Adaora had treated her mother so harshly. Some came to visit Mama Nkechi in the hospital, bringing her home-cooked food and sharing words of encouragement. The villagers whispered about how Adaora had abandoned her roots, and some even tried to talk sense into her, but Adaora turned them away, embarrassed by their presence. Meanwhile, Mama Nkechi's condition improved slowly. She expressed her desire to return to the village, no longer able to bear the strain of living with her daughter. Yet, she also felt a deep sadness at the thought of leaving her only child behind. Torn between her love for Adaora and her own survival, Mama Nkechi prayed for guidance, asking for strength to do what was best. One evening, as Mama Nkechi lay in her hospital bed, a visiting relative shared an old story about a rich man who lost everything because he neglected his family. The story resonated with Mama Nkechi, who hoped it might help Adaora see the importance of family and humility. When Adaora visited later that evening, Mama Nkechi shared the story with her, gently urging her to reflect on her actions. Adaora, however, dismissed the story as irrelevant, annoyed that her mother would try to guilt-trip her while still recovering. She was blind to the wisdom in her mother's words, believing her life was complete without the constraints of village values or backward traditions. Mama Nkechi felt a pang of despair, but knew that only life's experiences could teach her daughter the lessons she refused to learn. As Mama Nkechi recovered and returned to Adaora's home, she resolved to work only until she regained her strength, then returned to the village. However, she no longer moved with the same eagerness and loyalty as before. Her demeanor was distant, and though she continued to help with household tasks, she was no longer the self-sacrificing mother who once prioritized Adaora's happiness above her own well-being. Adaora sensed the change, but was too proud to acknowledge it. She dismissed her mother's detachment as fatigue, still blind to the hurt she had caused. Chukwudi, noticing the shift in the household dynamic, quietly began to distance himself from Adaora, finding her behavior increasingly unappealing. The once joyous home had become a cold and strained environment, each person lost in their own world of disappointment and regret. Months passed, and Mama Nkechi's health had improved enough for her to consider returning to the village. One morning, she quietly began packing her few belongings, intending to leave without fanfare. She knew Adaora would likely see her departure as a relief rather than a loss. As Mama Nkechi finished packing, she left a heartfelt note on the kitchen counter, expressing her love for Adaora and wishing her all the happiness she desired. She hoped, deep down, that Adaora would one day understand the sacrifices she had made and remember the values that once guided their family. When Adaora found the note later that day, she was shocked. She hadn't expected her mother to leave without consulting her. A mix of relief and resentment filled her heart, but she felt a slight pang of guilt reading her mother's words. It was the first time Adaora truly considered the pain she had caused. Yet, her pride held her back from reaching out or apologizing. She pushed the thought away, telling herself that Mama Nkechi would be happier in the village. Back in the village, Mama Nkechi was welcomed warmly by friends and relatives who had heard of her ordeal. They comforted her, assuring her that she was finally free from the hurtful treatment she had endured. She resumed her simple life with a renewed sense of peace, taking solace in the familiar rhythm of the village and the love of her community. Mama Nkechi found joy in her small stall once again, and though her heart ached for her daughter, she found healing in the kindness and respect of those around her. Meanwhile, Adaora's life in the city began to take a turn. Without her mother's constant presence and quiet support, she felt a void she hadn't anticipated. Chukwudi, now aware of the whispers and rumors surrounding Adaora's treatment of her mother, started to view her differently. He grew distant, spending more time away from home and barely engaging in conversation when they were together. Adaora's glamorous life felt increasingly hollow, her social circle thinning as her reputation suffered. One day, Chukwudi asked Adaora to sit down for a serious talk. He explained that her coldness toward her own mother had raised concerns about her character. He had begun to wonder if Adaora truly valued family or loyalty, qualities he deeply respected. Adaora was stunned, defensive at first, but Chukwudi's words struck a chord. She had always been proud of her social status and wealth. Yet here was her own husband questioning her integrity. For the first time, Adaora felt genuine shame. She realized that her obsession with fitting into a wealthy lifestyle had led her to abandon the values her mother had instilled in her. After the conversation with Chukwudi, Adaora spent days reflecting on her behavior. Memories of Mama Nkechi's love and sacrifices filled her mind, and she couldn't ignore the ache in her heart. She decided that it was time to face the truth of her actions and, possibly, make amends. Adaora gathered the courage to return to the village and seek out her mother. When she arrived, she was met with wary glances from villagers who had heard about her treatment of Mama Nkechi. She felt a deep sense of humility as she walked through the streets, no longer the proud, dismissive woman who had once left her roots behind. The journey back to her mother's modest home was filled with a mixture of dread and hope as she prepared herself for the possibility of rejection. At her mother's door, Adaora hesitated, but finally knocked. Mama Nkechi opened the door, her face etched with surprise and disbelief. Adaora fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she apologized sincerely, expressing regret for the pain she had caused. Mama Nkechi, though initially hesitant, saw the sincerity in her daughter's eyes and embraced her. Their reunion was one filled with tears and a shared understanding of forgiveness, though Adaora knew that rebuilding trust would take time. In the days that followed, Adaora stayed in the village to reconnect with her mother and repair their fractured relationship. She helped Mama Nkechi at the stall, learning to value the simple, honest work her mother had done for so many years. The experience humbled her, bringing back the sense of gratitude and grounding she had lost in the city. Together, they talked openly, sharing stories and laughter, mending the wounds of the past. Adaora returned to the city a changed woman, her relationship with Chukwudi now strengthened by her renewed understanding of family and humility. She no longer viewed wealth as a means to separate herself from her roots, but rather as an opportunity to honor them. Adaora began supporting her mother's business from afar, ensuring that Mama Nkechi lived comfortably and with dignity. Through her journey, Adaora learned the value of love, loyalty, and the irreplaceable bond she shared with her mother, finally understanding that true wealth was found in the heart, not in material possessions. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, follow, and subscribe for more videos like this.